Well, hello and welcome. I'm Danny Lichtenfeld, Director of the Brattleboro Museum. I'm delighted to be here with you this evening and so pleased that you've chosen to tune in for tonight's talk by photographer Rachel Portesi. It's a great honor for us to be able to share Rachel's hair portraits with all of you and with the world at large. It's a remarkable body of work, so rich and powerful in every aspect of conception and execution. And it's been resonating far and wide. There have been glowing reviews and insightful articles in American, British, French, and Portuguese art publications, among others. In British Vogue, writer Kitty Grady likened Rachel's work to that of the late Cuban-American artist Ana Mendieta and the Ivory Coast-based artist Letitia Key. And in the American edition of Vogue, Lila Ramsey called Rachel's hair portraits a collection of photographs which beguile with intimacy and the unexpected. And in a review for Art New England, Cynthia Close wrote, "These square images, while still, seem alive. They are movement captured. They vibrate somewhere between past and present." Needless to say, all this has been very exciting for us here at the Brattleboro Museum, as it's not every day that our exhibits garner this sort of attention around the world. So thank you, Rachel. In just a moment, I'm going to turn the floor over to Rachel herself, who will join us from her home studio in the tiny town of Saxtons River, Vermont, and talk with us about her work. And then after the talk, there will be a Q&A, so I hope you'll stick around for that. If you're here via Zoom and there are questions that occur to you during Rachel's talk, you can type them in using the Q&A button on your screen. That'll be a bit easier for us to monitor than the chat box, but there's also a chat button, and if there's something you need to communicate with us, like about how the, like a technical issue or something like that, you can try using the chat box for that. If you're watching on Facebook Live, just use the comment box and we'll be keeping an eye on that. Okay, without any further ado, it's my great pleasure to welcome Rachel Portesi.
Hi, and thank you, Danny, for the wonderful introduction. And thank you to the Brattleboro Museum for having the exhibition. And hello to everyone out there. I'm going to do a little slide presentation. Let me see here. And okay. So this is the show installed in the gallery at the Brattleboro Museum.
Excuse me, Rachel, we're not seeing your screen. It's Danny. We're not seeing your screen. We're just still seeing you.
Okay, let me try it again. Can you see my screen now?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
I see like a colorful, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
Technical issues. We knew there'd be something, right?
There we go. Perfect.
Here's my show installed at the museum. And I just want to mention that while many people cannot see the exhibition in person due to COVID restrictions, thanks to modern technology, you can visit the Brattleboro Museum website or my website and see installation photographs, as well as this really cool 3D interactive tour of the show. So please do. Our hair changes as we age. As a child, I had blonde, thin hair that was sometimes curly, and as I grew, it became thick and dark. The most hilarious phase of my hair was in the 80s. I lived in Quincy, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston, and I had a thick Boston accent, as well as wicked big hair. This project really started in 2014 while I was at a residency at the Vermont Studio Center. And I'd ordered a tintype kit. While I was waiting for it to arrive by mail, I began photographing the back of my head with my cell phone and arranging them like film stills. It was my first time away from my family since the birth of my son Emmett in 2007. And having all this time to myself in the studio, I felt kind of lost. It wasn't the first time I'd used my camera to explore concerns about my identity. When I first became a parent, I was really concerned with losing myself in motherhood. And so for a second, I'm just going to take us back 13 years to the birth of my son. After my son was born, I felt kind of anxious about the amount of time it took to take care of him. It felt like my identity was gone. Even during pregnancy, everything was suddenly about someone else. But it really hit home when I was at the hospital learning how to nurse. So my husband and I arrived at the hospital during a blizzard, and we had this kind of luxurious 3-day hospital stay. And I almost said the Brattleboro Museum was amazing, but the Brattleboro Memorial Hospital was amazing with their lactation consultants. And they taught me how to nurse. And on the second day, the nurse came in to see how it was going. And I said, it's great. You know, this is like 2 p.m. Like, I fed him this morning. I should probably feed him again. You know, I'm thinking like a person, you feed a kid 3 times a day. And that's when I learned that you nurse your child between 8 and 12 times a day. I was like, as someone who is in constant motion and always multitasking, I was like, there's no way in hell I'm going to sit around looking at my kid while he nurses all day. So I just strapped him to my body, and thus began the journey of attachment parenting and nursing on demand. I just took him everywhere and whipped my boob out to let him feed whenever he wanted to. Here's my family. I think part of what I really loved about being a mother and a wife during the kids' younger years is that it took everything of me. There was some kind of comfort in that. I realized that I'd been in a perpetual motion my whole life, and I started to wonder if dedicating my time to others had less to do with generosity and more to do with cowardice. I realized I hadn't really taken a moment to sit with how uncomfortable I was with myself, and this all came, you know, crashing down on me at this residency where I had ample time to just work and create and think. And now with all this time alone, I thought about my identity and the identity of myself from motherhood, from before motherhood, and even during those early years, no longer fit. And I felt left without something to replace it. Being a mother, I kind of felt like I was a kid before or something. I felt like a real grown-up, like a real woman now, but no idea what that meant. And I started making photographs of my hair. This is a photograph by one of my favorite photographers, Emmett Gowan. He took this photo of his wife, Edith, in 1967. In the 90s, I had the pleasure of hearing him speak and meeting both he and his wife at Marlborough College, thanks to my photography professor, John Willis. And somehow I don't remember anything specific about what he said, but afterward, I ran up the hill to the payphone in my dorm and called my dad. And I just remember saying, I just heard this guy speak. It was amazing. Like, I felt so connected, so moved in a room full of photographers. And I said, I think I understand finally how religious people must feel sometimes in church. Emmett Gowan struck me as an honest, open person. It showed in his work. It showed in his relationship with his wife. And I was forever inspired to try to live a little more like that in my life as well. I named my son Emmett after him. I was in this thinking about trying to find my identity after these early parenting years. I realized that so much of my life before motherhood had been driven by my biological desire to have children. And I felt maybe that makes me weak. Maybe, you know, I felt insecure about that. Had I spent my life following and collecting things that wouldn't last to sustain me through the later years in life? I kept thinking of squirrels and acorns. At the time, I actually had squirrels living in my studio wall, so I thought about squirrels. often. But I thought about squirrels and acorns, and I thought, had I collected enough acorns to make it through winter? And then I heard this, something that Gloria Steinem said in an interview with Terry Gross, and it really made me feel better. It was reassuring to me to hear that even women who didn't have children faced some of the same identity challenges when entering the second half of life. So while I could continue to make these types of photos of myself, I wanted to dig deeper and say more, do more with my hair. And this is the point where wanting to make wet plate collodion tintypes collided with the images I was interested in creating. And it became impossible for me to be both photographer and model at the same time. While I just want to take a minute here also, while I was trying to make these photographs, the tintype photographs, I was getting black plates constantly. I could not get a single image. And I'm going to take a minute here as well to talk a little bit about the tintype making process. In January, I will be doing a tintype demonstration on live Zoom, much like this, for the museum. But now I'm going to talk about the basics a little bit. So for those of you who don't know about it, you can have a general idea of how finicky, time-consuming it is, and how they are one-of-a-kind direct positives made within the camera. And I want to thank right now the Penumbra Foundation in New York City, Jeffrey Berliner, Lisa Imola, for teaching me how to make wet plate collodion photographs, because I was a disaster before them. Penumbra is an amazing resource for anyone interested in alternate process photography. Check out their website, and they have a great tintype studio run by Molly Lupo. It's a great resource. Tintypes are made on aluminum plates that were painted black. I make it light sensitive first by pouring a sticky substance called collodion on the plate. This is done with the lights on. After the plate is coated, the darkroom lights go off and it sits in silver nitrate for 3 minutes. Once it hits the silver nitrate, it's light sensitive, and everything has to be done in the dark after that. After it is light sensitive, I put it in a plate holder and load it into my camera, and it's a light sensitive plate. I'm going to play a little video. The first part is sped up, just putting the plate holder in the camera, lifting the slide so that the portion that's light sensitive is facing the camera lens. And to time the photographs, I actually just pull the lens off, set a timer, and put it back on. And just for fun, if you want to have an idea of how long the exposures are or how long my models have to sit still, when you see me take the lens cap off, try to hold really still. I usually hold my breath as well. And then wait until I put the lens cap on, and you'll have an idea of just how long the image is. So this is the plate holder. Again, I don't move this quickly. The slide comes out, and now facing the lens is the sensitive plate. Hold your breath. And now, so that's real time. It takes a long time. The lens is open for a long time, and my models are very good at staying still. You're going to meet one of my models later tonight, Isabel. After that process that you just saw, the plate comes back in the darkroom, it's developed, and then the next little video you're going to see is of the plate in the fixer. And I'm going to play that right now. So what's happening here is the places where the light came and hit the camera, the collodion is sticking to, the silver nitrate sticking to the collodion in the plate, making the light areas in the image. And where the dark areas are, the silver nitrate is rinsing off, either completely to expose the black plate underneath, or a little bit to make the darker parts. And that's where the magic happens. I love watching the image appear in the fixer. It feels like a magic trick every time. And then also to give you a sense of what's going on in the studio, this is my model, Rachel, And, the types of photographs I'm making have a very narrow depth of field. The lens is wide open, it's letting in a lot of light. But I often have these huge, crazy creations in my studio that are also in color. And here's Rachel sitting in kind of a branch cage between image making. I might have a plate in the silver bath or something while I'm doing this. While making these photographs, I explored how I felt pulled by the desires and expectations of men, how conflicted I felt in the classic role I chose as mother and wife. This image is made with, there's a quilting hoop and an embroidery hoop in this. This was made to look like a rickrack, this crazy mohawk, zigzag mohawk, is made to look like the rickrack on the left that I used in sewing projects. I explored the feeling of being pulled in too many directions at once, the feeling of trying to fill too many roles at one time, like to be strong, sexy, motherly, smart, interesting, an artist, a financial contributor. How I felt a lack of confidence through most of my life, that I kept so much of myself inside. And now that I was getting older, I felt ready to live in a more open and bold way. I was worried no one would listen. I'd heard over and over that older women become invisible. I felt concerned, like, was my value as a person gone before I realized I even had value myself? This image is of a bunch of different Victorian mourning jewelry. These are all made from hair. You can see even these kind of crazy basket weaves that are in the earrings or the beads on a necklace, the bands of the bracelets in the necklace, all made from hair. It's a very common practice to take the hair of a loved one and make jewelry from it. This locket, it has two different kinds of hair there. It might be hair from two different phases in a person's life, how we spoke earlier about hair changing over time, or it might be kind of a portrait of two people with the living and the dead together in this locket. People always also used hair as embroidery thread to create memorials, but also really intricate scenes in large wreaths. Here's an example of some of those. This is a piece that's at the Brattleboro Museum now. It's something of a family portrait for me, riffing off the idea of the Victorian era and mourning jewelry in a family portrait. This box holds hair from my stepdaughter, my son, my mom, my dad, my stepmom, my husband, and myself. I felt really moved putting this box together. I had my hair and hair from childhood, and my father's hair was mailed to me, and it was taped in this back of this photograph of him when he was just a little boy. And something about putting his hair and my son's hair in this box was just emotional and moving. This series of small pieces, I think of, pardon me one second. I think of it as kind of a portrait of my internal world. They make me think of making something new from the old or classic. When you come across a daguerreotype case and you open it, you have an expectation of what will be inside. It's also a direct nod to the challenge of the materials, which are often viewed through a very romantic and precious lens. I struggled with how to take that and make something new, at the same time looking at an older version of myself and trying to make something new as well. I did thinking about the very nature of being a woman. Having a child made all of my impulses feel less like the socialized behaviors I had thought they were before children, and more like an internal pattern driven by nature. These ideas came to me while at the DNA residency in Provincetown, P-Town. I want to say that most of the time I spent at DNA was used to stop and think and look and walk the beach rather than put pressure on myself to produce the much needed time to think. The ideas that were formed there made their way into my studio practice. I made pieces like this after a sea urchin. And then I visited the Louise Bourgeois exhibit at MoMA. I was familiar with her sculptures that are on display at Mass MoCA, but I had not seen this other work. I was floored by the exhibition. I saw how much her own hair played a role in her female identity and sexuality in her work. In this piece here, in particular, when I saw that, I felt a really strong connection to pieces like this sea urchin and her piece. Here, I need to move this little. So I began this kind of conversation with her. This is one of my favorite pieces. This is my favorite piece I've made. It's a homage to Bourgeois. It's a direct, I made it right from this image of hers, these images of hers. Many of her works feature spiders, which I didn't understand at first, but this is what she has to say about spiders. The spider is a repairer. If you bash into the web of a spider, she doesn't get mad, she weaves and repairs it. An artist can show things that other people are terrified of expressing. I had fun with her images and worked directly from the exhibition catalog, just playing around. It was really fun. There was a lot of laughing in the studio over this, especially this next image of Isabel as a silly spider. Because Louise Bourgeois' work resonated with me, I began to see new connections between my work and work I was already familiar with. I'm a huge Frida Kahlo fan. This is my husband and I as Frida and Diego on Halloween one year. And I made this Frida image as well. The branches in Isabel's hair in this picture were from a dogwood tree that my husband and stepdaughter planted when she was 3. And it's now a big tree and she's a big grown young woman. This is a painting of Ophelia at the Tate. In Hamlet, Ophelia's disheveled hair and flowers represent madness. This piece is titled Imogen. It's named after a picture book I read over and over again to my stepdaughter when she was a little girl. In the book, this girl around 6 or 7 wakes up with a rack of antlers on her head. It's huge. The book illustrates her ability to adapt to the sudden, unexpected physical change. I think of puberty, other physical and hormonal changes that women face throughout their lives. This is the first piece I made with hair and flowers and branches from my garden. But I want to say that I'm very fortunate to have a good friend nearby who owns a flower farm called Fast Pony Flowers. And she often shares with me flowers and vines to use in my creations. And often what she hands me or shares with me dictates some of the imagery I make. In these images, I see strong women who celebrate their very femaleness and own their own sexuality, are in charge of themselves. The first time someone I knew bought an art object and shared it with me was many, many years ago when he bought a portfolio of Luis Gonzalez Palmas. We sat and looked at each precious image. I was very moved and thought maybe someday, I think I was like 19 at the time. I don't know, I was very young, but I thought I hoped someday to own something so special myself. And partway through making the body of this work, I thought of him and realized that I had so obviously carried those images with me. And I could see how much my work was influenced by his work and that experience. At this point, I'm going to invite my model Isabel to talk about the making of these two images about her grandmother and what it was like to work together, the collaborative nature of our work. I'm going to stop share.
Hi, can everyone
Hi,
hear me? Yeah, so thanks for having me on the panel. But yeah, these pieces did feel especially collaborative, definitely. I guess just like to quickly start off, I think just our relationship in general is very collaborative. And like, I mean, I started hanging out in your studio because you were teaching me how to do wet plate when I was at towards the end of my high school years. And so that's kind of how we started our relationship. But it also, I think, started in sort of in the context of family, which I think is very much connected to this work for you, and also kind of connects how we have ended up kind of collaborating, I feel like, because you're friends with my mom, and that was the kind of an initial connection. And then I was at your studio a lot, and we ended up, you were teaching me, and then I ended up starting to model for you. And it was definitely collaborative in that we would kind of, just because I knew kind of just a tiny bit of what you know about the process, sometimes we would just like troubleshoot a lot together. And yeah, just the whole process felt very collaborative.
There were days when we couldn't get anything to come out. Remember? And I'd be we'd be looking at them. What the hell is going on?
We'd be like, what's happening? And because like the temperature and the air can affect everything. So we're like, maybe it's too cold, maybe it's too hot. Yes, there's a lot of like fun troubleshooting, and also just hanging out, and I don't know, kind of establishing our own relationship, which I think is really amazing and I hold really close to my heart. But then also that, like, just to kind of bring family into it more, like your family was always around. Like Emmett was always in the studio, Maddie was in the studio, Eric's in the house, everyone's around. So I kind of became, I was always around your family. And then even your dad would be around, and he and I would make like sculpture kind of structures to help with, I don't know, sometimes we would make
that's
sculptures.
right. I had put you guys to work building things outside.
Yeah, so it became sort of collaborative in this like familiar sense also, which kind of brings me back to the two images that you were sharing, because somehow, like, all of a sudden we were connected and sort of by my grandmother. So not just like me and your family space, or my mom coming over after, but yeah, my abuelita, you had this like cloth lace kind of fabric thing in the studio, and we started playing around with it, and it looked and it felt just like it was the same exact cloth that my abuelita had on her table, like her tablecloth, just like classic Hispanic households, like the lace tablecloth with the plastic over it. You can't touch, so plastic on the furniture, like, so nothing gets ruined.
Mm-hmm.
And we were messing around with that as a prop. And
I remember it drew your attention because you said you remembered the tablecloth and poking your fingers through the holes of the lace.
Yeah. I would sit at the table when I was at my abuelita's house visiting. I would sit on like whoever's lap I was sitting on at the table, and then the fabric would kind of stick out underneath the plastic, the clear plastic, and I would always just be messing around, just listening to whatever the conversation was at the table, like playing with the fabric to pass the time. And so, yeah, for me, that was a really beautiful connection that sort of involved all of a sudden or at least that side of my family into this already like very collaborative, like space, that was especially because of family.
Yeah. Thank you, Isabel. That's nice to hear. I'm going to show some images. I'm going to show those images again, and then show a little bit about what we did with them. Okay. All right. I'm going to go back to share screen. Can you guys see that now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, so we made these images, and then I'm just going to show a little bit behind this. As you look at the upper image with the piece of lace over her head, this is what it looked like. We literally, I had a big needle and I twisted her hair into small pieces and I sewed it into the lace to make those dark patterns. And then I'm just going to show a video of the one on the bottom where Isabel, we've obviously got the plate that worked, and we're so after the conversation about the conversations we were having about family, and we made an image of Isabel's grandmother. I made an image of my grandmother as well. It's based on this photograph she had on her bookshelf. She was at my aunt and uncle's wedding, and she had a crazy fuchsia pink hat with big flowers on it. It almost looked like one of those Italian swimming caps. So I made that. And then related to tactile experiences, I can remember on the holidays when my cousins and I would all gather in my Auntie Sharon and Uncle David's very formal living room. We piled all over laughing and talking. And I remember laying on the floor and handling the golden fringe that lined the bottom of the couch and chairs. This piece titled Graft is for me about how we build ourselves from the people around us, like the grafting of a fruit tree. In many ways, we emulate others as we're forming our own selves. This is another Emmett Gowan photograph of his wife Edith's grandmother. I want to take a minute to talk about death. I remember when I realized I was going to die, like that we all were, that to be alive means someday to not be alive. I was 16 and I had a panic attack. But the real moment I learned about death was at age 25 when my 19-year-old cousin Scott drowned. That's when it really hit home. It hit home that death comes for us all and we do not know when it will. The death of my cousin was crushing, and the true realization of my own mortality at first left me dumbfounded and paralyzed, but ultimately it motivated me to live, to face my fears. I went back to school and wrote my undergrad thesis, and that was the first time I was brave enough to express my own voice. These next two images are from a group of images that I've titled Floating. 1, 2, 3, I've actually titled them all crazy wrong. They are about existing with uncertainty when it feels like the ground you're standing on has dropped from beneath you. At other times in my life, that feeling has caused me to take sudden action or to make drastic changes in my life to distract myself. This time, when I was faced with those feelings, I wanted to sit with that uncertainty and to trust that the right path would open up. I was making peace with the not knowing. In the Greek myth of Apollo and Daphne, Daphne pleads with her father to turn her into a laurel tree rather than marry Apollo. I like to think that Louise Bourgeois was also thinking of Daphne when she made this untitled image. The next few images are more recent. It's tintype. I also made a few 8x10 Polaroids in the studio. Little Polaroid grid. And then I started making kind of merkins from things around my studio. There's a little yarn merkin series. It's the tintype. These are doilies made by my mother. This is an image inside my studio of Rachel waiting to have her photograph made. And I have this in here just to illustrate that I suppose the images I'm making are kind of monochromatic, but my studio is very much in color. I guess if you think about the time when this type of photographs were first being made during the Civil War, famously for the Civil War photographs, around all of them were battles and death and destruction and also beauty in the landscape. But here's Rachel. I love these moments in between shots where my models have to stay somewhat still so the flowers and branches and things don't fall apart. They're like these little living pictures. I shot a bunch of them on a 16mm hand crank camera, an 8mm camera, cell phone, like literally whatever I felt like grabbing that day. I kept meaning to kind of use the same camera all the time, but I didn't. So in the Brattle Museum is this installation. And if you do get to visit the show in person, make sure you look through the lens because there's a little, my video is in there. This piece is called Cycle. It kind of represents what, in some ways, the whole body of work is about: growth, decay, regeneration. And I'm next going to show you this in color. So if you can see on the left-hand side are this kind of dead, dried vegetation, and on the right is the new. In my camera, in the image that appears as it is backwards. So in the color image, you'll see that actually the live flowers on the right, on the left, and the dead ones on the right. And I want to take a minute here just to thank my friends and family for supporting this crazy project and standing behind me all the way. And I'm going to play this little video. As Isabel was saying, my family is very much connected to my studio life. My studio is connected to the house. During the project, during the making of this work, their kids were often hanging in the studio doing their homework, or we were all listening to music and together. And this kind of illustrates a typical scene during the making of this. That's my stepdaughter, Maddie. And my son, Emmett, who's likely pretending to do homework but sneaking video games while I'm making images. And me. And that is that. So thank you all. And I believe Danny has a few words to say next, or he'll be on with the question and answer. And Isabel, if you want to be there, maybe people might have questions for you as well.
Rachel, thank you. Thank you so much. I know you were a little nervous about this, and I just want to say that was a totally captivating, amazing presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Danny.
What a joy. And I just want to say, I mean, really what we're going to do now is invite all of you in the audience to please chime in with questions and comments, and I'll review how you can do that in just one second. But I just want to quickly say first that working here at the museum, I feel like it's always like this huge act of bravery and courage for artists to share their work, bring it out of the studio and then let it be shared with the world. But then it's like another whole step, like another whole layer to generously give us insight into the background and what the work means to you and where it came from. And I just think it's so generous and so inspiring and meaningful for us all to hear. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And thank you, Isabel, for being here too. Okay, so we have a lot of people who have been watching and listening, and would love to hear from you if you have comments or questions. And so, as I mentioned earlier, please feel free to type questions into the Q&A. Use the Q&A button, and I'm going to go in there in just a second and start reading those. It's a little easier if you do that rather than the chat button, which is a little harder to keep track of. But there's also maybe an option that you have on your screen to raise hand. And what that is, if you click on the raise hand button, then I will get a notification that you want to be unmuted and ask your question yourself, which is also fine if you prefer to do that rather than type it in. So feel free to use that option, and I'll try to keep all of that straight here. And so we have some questions and comments already. There was one I saw earlier in the chat from Jane, who says, "Your work is spectacular." And from Maya, who says, "Incredible to hear the story behind a series that we've been following for the last couple of years, unflinching." And now let's go to the questions here. Carl shared the Art New England review. Thank you, Carl. There's a link to that in the Q&A for anyone who's interested. Someone said, "Isabel has short hair. What a surprise." How were the hairdos constructed? That question might have been typed in before you shared some of that, but is there anything more that either one of you wants to say about how the hairdos were constructed?
Yeah, I'm going to look at you, Isabel, while I talk to you about it. I feel like we just kind of like, I would just start touching your hair and looking at what I had around. They kind of, sometimes I had a plan, like, you know, what I was doing, but often it just kind of feels to me like it just happened. I would start drilling and pulling things in the wall and taking it apart and everything. Is that your experience, Isabel?
Yeah, definitely. There were like literally drilling my hair. Not like sometimes we would use tacks or whatever we could find in the studio to keep it up on the wall, but there were a few times that we would actually drill. Like my hair, I remember getting
like,
and we thought we would have to cut off my hair. But yeah, those were my hair short now because I've cut it since then. But yeah.
I'm going to, for those of you who are looking at the Q&A, I'm going to jump around a little bit, but I'll try to cover everything. So Andrew asked, "Rachel, how many images do you create in a normal sitting, and how long is each session? And Isabel, how difficult was it to stay totally still during the process?"
So we would try to do 2 poses in a day sometimes. I feel like if I made an image in a day, we worked 6 to 8 hours, I would say. If I made one good image, I like felt really thrilled about it. If I could get 2, and sometimes we could make one in the morning and then another in the afternoon, but we didn't always get them. And I would say you were in position for like 3 hours a pose or something like that.
Yeah, sometimes it would be, I would say it probably averaged around 3 hours. And yeah, it was hard to stay still sometimes, but I don't know, you kind of just get into the groove, I guess.
Into a zone.
And get into the zone. And like it's funny because we would have in between shots, I would have my coffee cup on the side, and Rachel would come like give me some coffee in between shots where I could move a little second, or but yeah, it was like 3 hours at a time often. A lot of like slow breathing and just getting in the zone.
There were times when I would just be about ready to get the image the way I liked it, and either you or Rachel started squirming. You're like, I have got to be really like crazy. Your hair stuck in some crazy thing.
Carl writes, "Amazing. What is a merkin?"
A merkin is kind of like a toupee or a wig for the pubic region.
Uh-huh. Did you ever think you would be answering that question in public?
No.
Carl also asks, all of your models have long hair, it seems. Have you tried portraits with short hair? I have not yet tried portraits with short hair, but my desire to work with Isabel again might out. I'm not sure. I will. I'm open to the idea for sure. Cool. Alana Portesi says, amazing. Thank you for sharing your story. Hi, Alana. And someone anonymous asks, have you thought about using older models in your work? You mentioned the notion earlier of older women becoming invisible culturally. Yes, I actually have a series that's not hanging in the museum right now. I wish I could pull some images up of this amazing woman with gray hair. And I photographed her on a white background. And they're some of my favorite images. I have a few series of that. And I'll put them up on Instagram soon for whoever asked that. And please take a look because they're wonderful. I'm really looking, if you know anyone with a lot of white gray hair, please send them my way because I'd be happy to make images of older women. I feel like you live in the right part of the world for that. Like that's not going to be a really tall order. Someone else whose name I don't know says, I know you covered your technique at the beginning, though now that we've seen your work, would you again share the type of photography process that you employed? Yeah, and also for whoever's asking that question, in January, I'm going to do a full-on demonstration where you see me take an image and develop it. But basically, I'm trying to see if I can here. It's a black aluminum plate. It's painted black on one side. Basically, the substance called collodion is poured on it. It's somehow made from cotton. I keep meaning to find the details out from that. It's sticky, like maple syrup consistency. And then that plate goes into silver nitrate, which is light sensitive. It's what all negatives and film is made from, and prints actually. The silver nitrate is light sensitive and sticks to the collodion so that when the light comes through the camera and hits the light spots where the collodion, the nitrate will eventually stick to the collodion in the development process. And where it's darker or where it's black, the silver nitrate does not adhere and it rinses off, and that's how the darks are created. So that's the basics. Thank you. Rachel, why, do you have an idea why you're so attracted to like these instant photography processes like Polaroid and tintype? Yeah. Like what appeals to you? So for me, like when I showed that image of the plate appearing, it feels like magic. I like that, unlike some work I've done as a photographer digitally, it feels like a separation between work. It feels like I shot Polaroids for many years and they felt like they were for me. They were fun. They're a really interesting way to interact with people and share the process with them. It's not like, oh, I did this and then maybe you'll see it later. It's like, it's this excitement and collaboration with whoever's photograph you've taken. I also like that I can't monkey mind it and like worry and keep editing it in Photoshop or sit at a computer. It's like, it's done. You messed up or this corner doesn't, none of it comes out the way you want. Like there's always an area where you're like, I like this part of that picture and this with that one, but you have to move on. And so I like that. I like that you can't tweak it too much. Cool. Susan has raised her hand bravely here. So I'm going to try to unmute Susan and let's see if this will work, Susan, for you to ask your question yourself. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Rachel.
How are you?
Good. I'm thrilled and proud and excited. I love that I sense a flow of this work. I think that's really the way it works. Out of you and from many places, your past life, your present life, your interaction with Isabel, and the most powerful experience of being pregnant and having a child and not knowing where your life is going to go from there. And I've experienced the same kind of thing. And I love the person. I love your what you've put into it of yourself, the way you've expressed it, and it's in your work. And I love and understand that.
Thank you very much. That's a huge compliment, Susan. I appreciate it. That's really nice to hear.
Thank you, Susan. Vaughn, I see your hand up. We'll get to you in just 1 second. I'm just going to read a couple other items that have come into the Q&A. Joe says, Rachel, that was really beautiful. You've addressed such important and vulnerable aspects of motherhood, aging, and connections to family. The person who asked earlier, or who expressed surprise about Isabel's hair, says, but it was real hair, Isabel, not wigs or yarn or anything.
Yeah, it was real.
I bet it was, right? It was real hair. Veranda offers kind of a personal note, as one would expect from Veranda, saying, Rachel, Emily and I are thrilled to see this. We've always believed in you and your work. Emily will be in touch about your shared passion for hair. Love, yeah. Veranda.
Thank you, Veranda and Emily.
And here's a question from Pamela Mandel saying, stunning, beautiful work. What are you working on now?
That's a good question. I'm continuing a little bit with this project, and I'm not sure. I have ideas, but I hesitate to say them out loud, what this is morphing into. I'll let you know.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Get to bask in this one for a little while. There's a question: Will this show travel to other cities?
I'm hoping so.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have some conversations in place currently with galleries and other places. So I'm not sure where it's going to land next, but it's looking very much like it will be on display again.
Deservedly so. That would be really great. Okay, let me take Vaughn off of mute.
Hey, Rachel. It's Vaughn and Brian.
Hi.
Guys. Oh, hi. I wish I could see your faces.
Hi, Isabel. I'm stealing Vaughn's question, which Danny, you just asked, because we were wondering about current work, but I was, or you know, what your future work is. This was such a fantastic presentation.
Fantastic.
Yay. But I was wondering, when we were at the studio center and you were getting some animals.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I don't want to pull away from this because this is the focus, but if that's something that you could talk about.
Right, because Brian was telling me about that, and I was like, what's with those birds?
That animals and the birds, yeah. It's interesting. I had started taking photographs of roadkill and kind of making roadkill memorials out, some kind of way of honoring them, and my freezer actually has roadkill in it now. There's an owl and a snake. And I think, Brian, what you're talking about were some taxidermied animals. And that's a super challenge for me to work with dead things. And somehow right when COVID hit, I was like, I'm never doing that again. Although I've recently begun to wrap my head around it. So yeah, there will be more of that in the future.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to read a couple other questions that have come in here. I'm not sure how to pronounce this person's name. I'm going to say Majida, but I'm not sure if that's right. Sorry if it's not. Thank you for such an amazing presentation of your fantastic and visionary art. I live in Tucson, and without this online presentation, I would never have been able to see this. Although we cannot travel these days, the pandemic has been an opportunity to connect in a different way. If you made a DVD of this, I would love to buy a copy. Oh, thank you for that. We will post the recording of this whole event online on our website and on YouTube within a few days.
And that reminds me also that I want to mention that I have a catalog currently in production that that will be for sale shortly. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
I'll put that out
and so And Rachel, you'll make sure to let us know how people can order that and see that, and then we'll share it out through our museum channels. Okay, great. Someone named Ard says, great presentation, thank you. A question that is both technical and conceptual. I noticed that many of the images have the model's hair either lifted or elevated. Do you ever photograph the models from above looking down, whereby the hair can be arranged on the floor, or does the suspension of the hair have particular significance?
I like the suspension of the hair, but also my camera is massive. And the idea of, it feels too complicated to me. I wouldn't want it to fall on anyone. Isabel, can you imagine? Remember when it fell on me? It's pretty big and heavy. And there's something I like also about the way the hair is defying gravity. But people often ask if someone is laying on the floor. The images kind of look that way.
Lisa says, Rachel, you were great. Even though I've known you for 25 years, I learned so much more about you and your photography. Do you think this last body of work has changed your perspective about yourself as a woman and mother? P.S. I love you.
Love you too, and happy anniversary. I think it has. I think, you know, I worked through a lot of those issues while making this work. And I had a moment recently where I was like, I figured it out, aging, all of it. And then I thought, yeah, right. Like, give it a month or another week or something. And, you know, and I don't know. I learned a lot while I was making it, but I'm sure there's so much more to learn.
Well, and the next question was curious, from an anonymous person, curious to know what each of you have learned or taken away from doing this work.
Isabel, do you want to go?
I mean, I guess first thing that comes to mind is just the importance of collaboration. I guess that, yeah, for me, that's the main takeaway. It was so amazing and so beautiful, and important also as a fellow artist and photographer, to experience this type of collaboration.
It was fun. It definitely felt like we were in the trenches together many days, right?
Yeah.
I don't know enough about you know, different projects involving portraiture and you know, photographic portraiture to know if they're like, how often is there that kind of collaborative feel? It seems to me like the dynamic could very often be you're there and you, the model, have no agency, and it's maybe not the most pleasant experience, and I, the photographer, and the actor here. And, I don't know if that's, it sounds like that is not the vibe in your studio.
Yeah, and it depends on, I photographed other models, and some of them kind of check out a little bit and become more like objects, and some of them and other things. I think it's like anything else. I think Isabel and I just had some magic chemistry together in the studio, and it was just, we just fed off each other, and I think the project and the images of her really show that.
Someone asks, was the mourning jewelry yours? Do you collect hair artifacts?
It's not mine. I found the image on the internet, but sometimes I dream of getting some kind of mourning hair piece, and I look at them online, but I personally don't own anything now.
Here's a question from Chard, and I'm just going to read it. Rachel, could you talk a little about the challenges of photographing Randy the grouse?
Oh my goodness, Chard. This is Chard Denord, who is the Vermont Poet Laureate. And Chard is someone, I don't know if you guys know, I've known two people like this in my life who befriend birds. I knew one guy who had a robin friend, and then Chard, the birds like love Chard, and they had this grouse named Randy who just followed him around, and he had me photograph Randy the grouse. And I did. I made a tintype of Randy, but not, Randy just would not stay still long enough. So I wound up making a digital photograph and a transparency, which I kind of, in the dark room with an enlarger, printed like it was a tintype. But Randy.
Cool. Jane asks, any chance of making cards with your images? I would love to buy them.
Oh, that's a great idea. That may be something I might do.
Nice. Majida chimed in here again to say you have some serious fans now. And Carl has shared a link. Thank you, Carl. He says an amazing book about hair by Robert McCracken Peck. And there's a link, looks like maybe to a review in Hyperallergic. And Ethan typed in a question that I think you've sort of addressed. It seems all the work you've created revolves around hair. Do you expect to continue further down this path, or are there any other ideas or projects you want to create? I think you've talked a little bit about other projects that didn't involve hair, and also some other projects that are maybe in the works.
Yep, I'm not sure yet. I'm very excited, so we'll see.
And someone asks, have you ever digitally animated your photos, or is that too monkey-minded?
Digitally animated my photos. I'm not even sure I know what that is. I don't know what that
Anonymous,
is. Is that like making like a
yeah.
superimposing images so they're like moving pictures, like animation?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know. This person also says, oh, I'm sorry, Rachel, go ahead.
I think the closest I've come to that are those short little films of my models moving. Like I totally love to watch them. So that's similar, but I'd like to know what animation is.
Well, this person also says, love your work. Thank you.
Okay.
We've made it through your questions, which have been terrific, and comments. Thank you all so much. I just want to say a couple things in closing here, and then Rachel or Isabella, certainly if there's anything else that you want to add or touch on, please feel free. I just want to acknowledge and thank the Brattleboro Museum's longtime chief curator, Mara Williams, who's watching and here tonight, because she's the one who brought Rachel's extraordinary work to our attention and curated the exhibit. So thank you, Mara. And I just want to let people know about the two other events that we've been alluding to that are coming up involving Rachel and her work while the exhibit is up. On January 14th, also here via Zoom, a scholar of Victorian hair work is going to give a lecture about Victorian hair work. And on January 21st, as Rachel has mentioned, she's going to do a live via Zoom demonstration of tintype photographic process. So please tune back. Go ahead.
I couldn't remember what date that was, but I realized I can look it up.
Yeah. And those dates are on our website. I think I've got them right here, but they're at brattleboromuseum.org. And if you follow us on social media or you subscribe to our e-newsletter, which you can do through our website, you'll be sure to get all that information and the links and so on. Couple of final comments have come in. Michelle says your work resonates so clearly that no additional questions feel needed. And Karen, thanks all of us. You're very welcome, Karen. And I just want to second what Rachel said earlier. For those of you who are unable to make it here to the museum for whatever reason, either go to Rachel's website or go to the museum's website and find the exhibit page for Rachel's exhibit, and it'll be real obvious how to click on this really fantastic virtual tour of the exhibit, and you can move yourself around the gallery and zoom in on the images and things. And this is the first time we've ever done this with this set of exhibits that we have up right now, and we're so pleased with how that's turned out. So I hope you'll all take advantage of that. And I do hope that those of you who are able to will actually come here to the museum and see Rachel's work in person and our other exhibits. It's a pretty good place to be able to socially distance, and everyone's wearing masks and we're cleaning all the time, and it feels pretty safe. But the world is a crazy place right now, and I understand that that's not possible for many people or not comfortable for many people. So by all means, you know, do what makes you comfortable, and also please stay safe and take care of the people around you. And let's just try to keep each other positive through, you know, staying positive through all of this. An end to this weird time will come. And the last thing I see here, right, but someone saying not positive for COVID. Correct. And John Willis has just written in saying, thank you so much, Rachel. This work is beautiful. As you are aware, I've long been a fan of your work.
Thank you. And
Really
John
nice.
is my photography professor, so I owe a lot to John.
Yeah. Just checking to make sure I'm not missing any other comments or anything. People, just more expressions of gratitude from Mara and others. Linda says, I really appreciate hearing about your influences and inspirations and how you've seen links throughout your life. And I think that's going to do it. And so I once again want to thank all of you who have tuned in. And thank you, Isabel, for joining us tonight. And most especially, Rachel, thank you for this incredible body of work. It is such a treat to have it up here at the museum. And thank you for this great, great presentation tonight.
Thank you. It's an honor. And I do want to mention Mara Williams, because I'm forever thankful that she saw something in my work and curated this exhibition. It's been life-changing for me. And there are not enough words to thank Mara. So thank you.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, everyone, enjoy the rest of your night and be well, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you all. I think I'm kind of counting on I didn't thank our behind the scenes events manager, who's kind of making all the Zoom wizardry happen. And she's the one who would normally take that cue to end the Zoom. So I think Isabel